Actually, I cannot answer that question. You should answer that question.
Él dice que en realidad esa pregunta debería responderle nuestro representante del municipio aquí. No sé si Polo quiere.
Bueno, en realidad, Loja hay mucho por hacer. Yo creo que lo primero que tenemos que hacer nosotros es cambiar de actitud. Creo que, como dije anteriormente, tenemos que subirnos a ese tren del desarrollo, a ese tren del caminar día a día por un Loja mejor, por un país mejor. Hay cosas puntuales. ¿Qué falta en Loja? Faltan colectores marginales. En Loja, como les dije en la exposición, no estamos poniendo totalmente el agua servidas en donde deben estar. Están yendo a los cauces de los ríos. Es una de las alternativas que nosotros tenemos que hacer. Dos, Loja está trabajando en un plan de desarrollo. Nosotros tenemos que tener un plan bien claro. ¿Qué tierras son apropiadas para construir? ¿Qué tierras son apropiadas para áreas verdes? ¿Qué tierras se debe hacer saneamiento? ¿Qué áreas verdes se debe de dejar? Ese es un PUG, lo que se conoce como un PUG. Es la forma como nosotros debemos hacer nuestro ordenamiento territorial y avanzar. Como les digo, en definitiva hay muchos problemas, muchos proyectos que se deben hacer. Pero como les digo, tenemos que ir caminando una ciudad como va creciendo, es igual que la familia. Va creciendo la familia, tenemos nuevas necesidades. Hay que hacer otro dormitorio, necesitamos otra cuna, necesitamos otro plato, necesitamos más trabajo, más dinero. Es igual que en una ciudad. En el caminar, en el tiempo, vamos a encontrarnos con problemas, pero urgentemente, como les digo, son esos problemas. Muchas gracias.
Gracias, Polo, por eso. I don't think so. Okay, so the next one is, how do you see the work of Latin America's cities to reduce pollution? La pregunta es, ¿cómo usted ve el trabajo de las ciudades latinoamericanas para reducir la polución?
That's a good question. I have traveled extensively all over Latin America, everywhere in South America and also Central America and Mexico, a lot, for 30 years. It is a similar pollution problem everywhere. One of the big problems, of course, is the transportation sector. A lot of diesel cars and trucks are used in Latin America, and a reduction in the use of diesel will be a big improvement in the air quality. Another, of course, is improved public transportation. And that's another area I see is often a problem throughout Latin America. A third big problem I see is water management. Many places do not treat the sewage. They do not treat the wastewater, and the raw sewage is released into a river or the ocean, and this is really bad. I actually had an experience in the Galapagos in Ecuador 20 years ago, where we were on an island in the Galapagos, and the small town on that island was releasing all of their sewage as raw sewage into the ocean. And it was killing the fish and lots of other problems. So this is an area that I also see is a problem. I see it in all throughout Latin America. And the last, I would say, that's very important is public education. In the US, for more than 40 years, there has been a huge public education effort to convince the public not to litter, not to throw garbage on the street or into the water. And of course, there are fines for doing so. And if you are caught by the police, you have to pay money. And so that law is also enforced. So I think having a bigger public education to convince the public to control waste management in their own personal lives is also critical to improving the pollution situation in cities throughout Latin America.
Thank you, David. La siguiente pregunta dice, en la contaminación de compuestos orgánicos al aire, ¿usted considera a las áreas rurales como las que describen menor riesgo? Sin embargo, si sumamos los pesticidas, ocurre lo contrario. So the question is, in the air pollution, do you consider all rural areas as the lower risk? Nonetheless, if we take into account the pesticides, is the opposite.
Correct. So the pesticides is a big problem in rural areas. It frequently is more of a problem for the water than for the air. Obviously, at the time that the pesticide is being applied, it produces some air pollution. And of course, the persons applying the pesticide are exposed. But the long-term problem of the pesticides is water, soil and water pollution. And so this is a problem. As you know, my agency, the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency, is the agency in the U.S. to regulate pesticides, to allow certain pesticides to be used or not, and how to use them. But unfortunately, many of these pesticides that are not allowed to be used in the U.S. are still made in the U.S. The law still allows the companies like Monsanto to make pesticides that are not allowed to be used in the U.S. and they are exported frequently to Latin America. So this is a problem, and we need to change our laws so that those pesticides which are banned in the U.S. are simply not made, so that other countries are not exposed to them. So I agree about the importance of pesticides in rural areas, but it's more of a soil and water pollution problem than the air pollution problem.
Okay. The next one is, what is the frequency for measuring CO2 in Denver, Paris, and what would be the frequency that you recommend?
The US EPA has a law about how much carbon monoxide, carbon dioxide, sulfur dioxide, ozone, PM 2.5 should be allowed. I won't go through the specific numbers. You can go to the EPA website and you will see them. It's public knowledge. But I can tell you that even with these laws, about 40% of the US population from time to time is exposed to levels of those air pollutants that are higher than the law allows. It's not constant, but every now and then, because of the climate or other things, the levels of certain pollutants are higher than the legal limit. So it is very difficult to regulate those levels. On the other hand, we have laws that, at least for certain cities and for certain companies, regulate the amount of certain pollutants that the company is permitted to put into the air on an annual basis. And companies are fined if they exceed that concentration of pollutants each year. So the answer to this is twofold. You have to have laws and you have to enforce the laws. And even then, it's still very difficult to keep the pollution levels at the level that the law allows. Even in the US, unfortunately, from time to time in certain areas, the pollution levels are higher than the law allows. So it's very difficult.
Okay. In your knowledge, is there any program from the States working with people in Latin America to help with techniques to reduce the impacts of pollution?
Yes, there are many collaborative interactions between Canada and US and Latin America. It's been going on for 40 years through government agencies and through private sector agencies, nonprofit organizations of various sorts. There really is a lot of collaboration between scientists in Latin America and in North America. It's been going on forever. And people do try to work together to use best practices to reduce pollution. I can tell you that my colleagues in Washington, D.C. at the Environmental Protection Agency meet regularly with their similar colleagues throughout Latin America. This has been going on forever. To be in communication, make sure everybody knows what the best practices are, and to try to help to do that. So yes, there are a lot of collaborations.
Next one. What is the work done in the United States to treat plastic in the coast?
Plastic
Plastics
in the water?
I guess in the water.
In the
yes,
coast.
In the coastline.
In the coastline, yeah.
The ocean.
Yeah, nothing. Unfortunately, plastic contamination is really a big problem all over the world, including in the US. Obviously, in the US, we have a lot of the waste, particularly plastic waste, is recycled. And that keeps it out of the ocean and out of the water. But still, a lot goes into the water and into the ocean. And this is a huge problem, and it's becoming bigger. So I don't have a good answer to this problem. The only real way to solve the problem is to stop putting plastics into the waste stream going to the oceans. That's what you have to do. Because once it's already in the water and on the coast, you almost cannot remove it. So you have to stop it at the beginning, and that involves laws, public education, recycling, etc.
En honor al tiempo, solo voy a hacer dos preguntas más porque todavía restan algunas, pero yo creo que todos también están un poco ansiosos para salir. So I'm just going to ask two more questions. Sure. The next one is, what do you think about the water wasted for cattle raising?
Yeah. So cattle raising is a big problem everywhere. As some of you know, it's not just the water that's the problem. Cows produce a lot of methane. And in fact, as much as 50% of the methane pollution in the air is coming from cattle and from cows. So agriculture in general contributes a lot to both air and water pollution. And certainly for water pollution, managing the waste from the cattle is a huge problem. Where I live in North Carolina, we have a very big problem. It doesn't involve cattle. It involves chickens, turkeys, and pigs. North Carolina is #1 or #2 state in the United States to grow chickens, turkeys, and pigs. And they produce a lot of waste. And it is very difficult to properly manage that waste. It causes water pollution, air pollution, and every time we get a hurricane, for example, on the coast, the rivers overflow and get contaminated by the waste from the pigs and the chickens and the turkey. So this is a huge problem. And also in the US, our cattle are raised in confined spaces, and they produce a lot of waste, and managing those waste so that the waste does not go into rivers and streams is very difficult. So one idea people have, of course, is that we should stop eating so much meat. That's the real answer to the problem. If we were more vegetarian, you would have less of this problem. But in the meantime, it's critical to manage the waste from cattle raising.
Okay, the last one. So how is it treated, the issues about air pollution from a public health matter?
So I need to understand.
I don't really get that question, but I guess how do you manage the air pollution from a public health viewpoint?
Point of view,
Yeah.
yeah. So we have these laws that I described to you regarding air pollutants. And especially this has to do with regulating industries from emitting certain pollutants into the air. And those industries do get fined if they exceed the allowable amount of pollution. There is a big public knowledge in the US about air pollution, as there is almost everywhere. People know air pollution causes all kinds of problems. Right now, for example, we are having lots of forest fires, particularly in California. On an annual year in the US, 40% of the air pollution comes from forest fires. It doesn't come from cars and industries. It actually comes from forest fires. And so we have a big effort to control these forest fires, but it's very difficult. So the public is very aware of air pollution problems. We have a lot of laws, but we still have a problem. The air is still polluted, and as I said, about 40% of the US population still lives in air that frequently does not meet the legal allowed amounts of air pollutants. The amounts are higher. So it's still a problem we are struggling with. Okay.
Gracias, David.
Yeah, thank you very much. Let's see. I should get my stick.
Por favor, ahora sí pasamos al receso. Luego del receso se dividirán nuevamente las salas, como lo habíamos hecho en el día de ayer.